attention, current issues, topical matters, after which we will give you an opportunity to ask questions on his opening presentation. And I rather suspect there may be enough time to go outside of matters in his opening presentation. I hand you over to Dr. Rajanand.
Thank you, Kwame, and good morning again, ladies and gentlemen of the media. This morning, two matters that I will be bringing to your attention: money laundering update and July the 4th happenings. Money laundering update and July the 4th happenings. Allow me to begin with money laundering update and to invite your attention to the following. The efforts of the government of Guyana and the multitude of responsible stakeholders have not been in vain. The machinations of the parliamentary opposition parties, APNU and AFC, have failed. Presidential advisor Ms. Gail Teixeira disclosed that after comprehensive consideration by FATF, this is at its June plenary, Guyana was not considered for further blacklisting. Guyana was not considered for further blacklisting. Instead, Guyana, having been referred to FATF by CFATF, would be subjected to a targeted review. The targeted review that was imposed at that plenary would actually provide 4 months for further work on achieving FATF compliant anti-money laundering legislation, and it will entail during this period of 4 months, reviews by FATF, and review that would be conducted by the North American branch, the North American contingent of FATF. In essence, until the reporting in October of 2014, that would be made at the FATF plenary, wherever that is to be held in October of 2014. Guyana will have that period from now until then to achieve ultimately FATF compliant legislation and to have the most favorable of reviews possible, were that not, this is CFATF legislation, were that not provided. 4 months from today until October of 2014, during which the targeted review would be conducted by the North American contingent, and ideally a time for Guyana, for the government and the political opposition in Parliament to conclude the enactment of FATF compliant legislation. The government, in the context of that development, has focused its attention on the enactment, on the achievement of the enactment of FATF compliant legislation, but also in the context of the review has also dedicated attention to the non-legislative recommendations, that were submitted by CFATF during their third round of the multilateral evaluation mechanism of the year. You may recall I've already informed you that Cabinet had favorably pronounced on matters related to that non-legislative recommendation, specifically heightening investigation and prosecution of money laundering offenses, heightening the investigation and prosecution of money laundering offenses. I am able today to advise the SOCU, the Special Organized Crime Unit, has been provided with a headquarters building. This is on Camp Street, adjacent to the Central Immigration Office. That's the south of that office. This is the intended headquarters now of SOCU, and Cabinet will consider the estimates that have been submitted for the rehabilitation of the building and for the resourcing of SOCU. This, of course, entails the FFEs for the building, recruitment of the complement of staff, and associated expenditure. Our hope is that these non-legislative interventions in the regime of anti-money laundering, national character, our abilities, our capabilities in this realm, anti-money laundering, would indeed be fast-tracked, and support would be provided at all levels in having this more recent initiative completed. I need not comment on the nexus with the targeted review of this activity and its completion. July the 4th happenings. The outgoing U.S. ambassador leaves, we are informed, on Sunday, the 6th of July, 2014. The outgoing U.S. ambassador has already submitted for government's consideration the application for agreement for the appointment of his successor. Yet, on Monday, the 30th of June 2014, the outgoing U.S. ambassador, addressing the Blue Caps, volunteered, elected to go out in a blaze of contention. Apart from disregarding the issues of timing and that of a captive audience, he launched a broadside against President Ramatar, the government of Guyana, Comrade Clement Rohi, the General Secretary of the governing People's Progressive Party, the People's Progressive Party itself, and his remarks came perilously close to the rantings of the current opposition parties. He saw it fit to accuse the president of duplicity regarding constitutional rectitude. He sought to have the intellect of the General Secretary of the governing People's Progressive Party belittled. Amazingly, the outgoing U.S. ambassador felt it necessary to remind the Blue Cappers about the comparable grounds for insurrection between the 1776 issues that faced King George at the time of the birth of the nation, and that which is facing President Ramatar in his 2011-2016 term in office with regards to local government elections and other issues, political issues. He went on in a tirade exploiting the occasion, exploiting the young minds of the captive blue cap audience. Choose these media reactions astonishingly were most muted. Choose these media reactions, that's the media reactions to the outgoing U.S. ambassador's remarks, astonishingly were muted. The administration, the PPP civic administration, was disposed to act and to act immediately. The annual July the 4th ritual presented an ideal opportunity. The acting Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Priya Manichan, an attorney of law by training, relying on Article 37 of the Constitution of Guyana, delivered a legitimate blast, a feral blast, in response to the U.S. ambassador. Article 37 of the Constitution of Guyana says, the state supports the legitimate aspirations of other people for freedom and independence, and will establish relations with all states on the basis of sovereign equality, mutual respect, inviolability of frontiers, territorial integrity, peaceful settlement of dispute, non-intervention, non-intervention in internal affairs, non-intervention in internal affairs, and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. And the state will operate among other states. Article 37 of the Constitution of the United States, an imperative that guided the cabinet and the government of Guyana in the content of its response to the American ambassador remarks. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, those are my contributions this morning. Time indeed avails itself, and I will be prepared to answer questions in any order whatsoever. And my opening statement and other matters of topical interest.
Please, there is an order here, okay? I saw Ursula's hand and then Michael here.
Okay, Dr. Langshan, Rabia Fujina. Apart from the statement you just made and the statement made by Minister Manachan, according to that, the statement made by the President earlier, are there any other likely reactions by the government of Guyana to the provocation by the U.S. ambassador?
So profoundly has been the impact of the outgoing U.S. ambassador's actions. And I must admit that it is not in isolation of the Monday Blue Cap event. It is cumulative effort capped by his remarks on Monday. Capped by his remarks on Monday. And was, I think, a fitting response before the feral blast by the government. Wise, it may be considered to suffice. Lest there be any doubt in any minds, I think the administration would see it fit to have an engagement with the entire diplomatic corps. The entire diplomatic corps. In the context of Article 37, but not only in the context of Article 37 of the Constitution of Guyana, the context of custom and practice and reciprocity and comparable behavior among diplomats recognized in sovereign nations. I think that may very well close the loop when it comes to the government's views being pellucidly made clear to the diplomats, to the public, to all and sundry on matters of this nature and the likely positions that can be anticipated by the government of Guyana.
Dr. Langshan, Michael Young, the Guyana Times. Could you say what would be your direct response to the EPMU's call for an apology given the statements made by the minister? The party believes that those statements do not represent the general view of the Guyanese public. And secondly, could you say whether or not you were surprised at the response of the parties themselves and the other stakeholders at the diplomatic event on Tuesday?
Monday. Which one?
Independence.
Monday or
Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday night. Well, I would say this.
Sorry, it was Wednesday, the second of
Which
July.
one you want to know the reaction?
Just the
4th of July.
Before July.
Yeah, it was on the second
Yeah.
Wednesday, yeah.
the demands of I am taking it that the leader of the opposition has indeed spoken on behalf of the opposition, but the demands of the leader of the opposition follows a pattern that we are discerning when it comes to defense of the sovereignty, and in some instances, when it comes to the defense of the territorial integrity of this country, of this nation. I see no need to remind you of the position that he took. Retired Brigadier Granger, on our western border with the more recent engagement between Guyana and Venezuela with regards to the seizure by the Venezuelan military, their navy, of a ship that was doing exploratory work in Guyana, EEZ. I need not remind you of his remarks on the eastern border concerning the revelations made about the alleged mining that was going to be allowed in the New River Triangle. On both occasions, Mr. Granger, Brigadier Retired Granger, adopted positions that were not in consonance with the government's and a national position. Indeed, it seemed to be, and it continues to be, a concern of ours that anything that allows the president and the government to be the subject of contention, the opposition can be relied upon to take sides other than in support of the government. I don't doubt that there are indeed issues where such may or may not be permissible. But when it comes to Guyana, or sovereignty, or territorial integrity, like in all other countries, our expectations are that all parties, all Guyanese will rally to the call. Unfortunately, whilst this may have been so, historically, definitely during the times of the PNC regime, where it came to the support that the People's Progressive Party provided to the government of that day on those issues, today seems to have brought a different enlightenment to that segment of the body politic. Nothing is in what area it, nothing. And if it comes to even disregarding the commitment to being patriots, to address properly their pretensions of being the new government of this country, their actions indeed are sadly lacking. Their actions are sadly lacking. Where else in this CARICOM, where else in this CARICOM can a diplomat directly and indirectly, publicly and privately, advised about the government's positions on this matter, can elect in the form and fashion he did, to address, to rebuke, and to have such vile statements about a government, its leader. And for the opposition to be talking about vulgar, I wonder who determines this vulgarity. I wonder who determines this vulgarity. They said nothing of substance, nothing of substance after the U.S. ambassador's tirade on Monday. Even a weak-kneed patriot in the body politic with such pretenses as theirs would have been tempted to say something, even anonymously. But no, not Mr. Granger and his ilk. No, sits in Hackney Street at a state expense, taxpayers' expense. And when the U.S. ambassador is treated by this administration to a fitting response, suddenly he finds, and others must admit, and others, suddenly they find the strength to be heard and to have their voices proclaiming, advising, pronouncing against the actions of this administration. We move on. And the opportunities we hope will be lessened by the actions and the forthright actions that we have taken today. But I say this, we have no expectations of the opposition and elements on the body politic joining the government in its defense of Guyana's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. We wouldn't fool ourselves.
Gary, as a culture minister. Sir, you made mention of the ambassador's vile statements. What I would want to know is, are any of his statements inaccurate? Secondly, you say that the reception was an ideal situation to respond, an ideal time to respond. Given the response at the reception, most rejected Ms. Manichan's statement at the time, why do you say that was an ideal situation to respond? And if I could, what has changed in terms of party policy, so to speak, in dealing with the Americans? Because I remember
Gary, just hold with the two questions for now, and then let's stop answering, then we move on. The two questions.
No,
Yes.
they're
Okay, please, please.
I will deal with this notion of ideas. There's a reason why the Cabinet Secretary, in addressing the July 4th happenings, it might have missed you. But you've been coming to these presentations for some time. Structure of presentation should not be dismissed. Might I repeat for you if you did? The outgoing American ambassador leaves, we are informed, on Sunday the 6th of July. The outgoing U.S. ambassador has already submitted the application for agreement for the appointment of his successor. Let us interpret my contentions about ideal on that basis. He's leaving on the 6th of June. Sorry, he's leaving on the 6th of July. The ideal opportunity presented itself on Wednesday, the 3rd. No, Wednesday, the 2nd.
Second.
Wednesday, the 2nd of July. Perhaps you could conjure, you could think about an opportunity, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. I would concede the leaving on the 6th. That would not have been an ideal opportunity at the airport or wherever. Where?
This same function.
On the 6th, it wasn't until on the 6th.
For saying the president.
Well, we didn't set the date. It was July the 4th, but it was brought forward and told to the 2nd. So that, I expect, addresses your question about the ideal. I don't remember what your first question was.
What was inaccurate about the ambassador?
You know, you're missing the point totally. This has nothing to do with accuracy and inaccuracy. It has less to do with that and more to do with what was actually said. Has more to do. I said the ambassador was publicly, privately, directly, and indirectly informed, knowledgeable about the positions of the administration on this matter. I want to believe, I must admit, I don't have any formal training in diplomacy. I picked up a few things in 22 years. I've seen many ambassadors come and go, and I always remind them that they could tell their successor they got a man named luncheon sitting in the office of the president that you will have to engage during their term of office. So I've learned a few things. And I've come to be aware, I've been made aware what are the ranges of acceptable diplomatic behavior. I would like you, and this is not one of those areas where I will dispute. I would like you, and here on the basis of accuracy, remind me if possible of this behavior of this sort being encountered by this administration here in Guyana at the hands of diplomats. And I can tell you, from the luncheon, that there have been more incisive issues that have separated us. And after our last engagement privately with the ambassadors, ACP, A, B, C, and EU, on matters like these, we agreed to disagree. We didn't say we're going to expose our differences publicly with venom and contentiously. We said, as we dined at lunch, we agreed to disagree. I want to believe that we feel heated, strongly so, about many things that are being done in many other countries where we have a diplomatic presence. But I'm pretty certain comparable provisions in their constitution, mandate the nature of our behavior diplomatically. I put it to you that this ambassador went beyond the red line. I put it to you.
On that same note then,
Plus,
yeah, on that same note, sir, 1990, Ambassador Fleming Jones, followed by President Jimmy Carter, at the time made similar or even more blistering remarks about the then President Hoy and the PNC administration. If you had to compare those remarks with what Ambassador Hart said today to evoke the kind of response you would have elicited.
I spoke to you, Adam, about my 22 years. It didn't go back to 1990. So you may want to advise us here. What did the then government, what then did the then cabinet, what did the then media response to those issues were?
If I remember rightly, they were rather muted. And the records are there. When Jimmy Carter came in this very room to hold a press conference that changed the status quo for elections, Fleming Jones walking roughshod over the Guyana Elections Commission. At the time the office was on South Road. I was there and you were there. Nothing has changed since then.
No, I was
Welcome
not.
by the
1990, I was.
When I said you were there, you were around in Guyana.
Oh, yes, I was probably in Georgian Hospital.
Nothing has changed. The ambassadors, the Americans you invited to get involved in Guyana's affairs, and they have never left since then.
No. If you're talking about history, I don't get this history. The involvement I have reminded the U.S. ambassadors in the sovereign affairs. Let's go back to what Schlesinger admitted. It didn't start in 1990.
That is true.
It didn't start in 1990. And I kept reminding the ambassador that those of us old enough who can recall either the history or the actual events have never allowed the interference of the 50s and the 60s and the impact it had on the evolution of the politics of Guyana to ever leave our minds, our consciousness. So the interference, you may want to see where the Americans are concerned, is almost hereditary. I am dealing with limits. I am dealing with specific extent to which this interference actually becomes now policy. And what has been drawn to the American attention on July the 2nd, Wednesday, July the 2nd, what has been said publicly as the government of Guyana's position, it may have been something similar in 1990. But I am speaking authoritatively about 2014. This is the line. This is the line. And we're saying all and sundry, you cross this line at your own peril.
Just to bring you back to the AML update, you said that we've been given 4 months by FATF. Now, in your remarks, you also spoke to establishments more greatly SOCO and some other non-recommendations with respect to that. But the primary thing here is the position established by the combined opposition for the establishment of the Procurement Commission, as well as some of the bills with regard to passage in the National Assembly by the APNU. Given the 4 months that we have, what would be the outcome of those things that the opposition are relentlessly calling for?
We met, as you probably have heard, although I understand there's some elements of dispute. We met on 2 premises. One, when I said we, the government and APNU, one, that there was indeed a recognition of a spirit of compromise. A spirit of compromise that would see money laundering, that is FATF compliant money laundering legislation and its enactment to avoid blacklisting being what the government prioritized in a compromise engagement. To recognize that APNU had bills that were not assented to in Parliament. And that was APNU's, I might say, their number one priority. And on behalf of the AFC, the enactment of procurement law and the procurement commission establishment. 3, what we would consider pivotal matters, issues around which a compromise could have been weaved, could have been woven. We agreed to approach, this is we, APNU and the government, agreed to approach this compromise in a particular fashion. The details perhaps are unnecessary. All I need to advise is that the outcome, and the outcome was zilch, unavailing. Couldn't make contact with the AFC, and peculiarly, this nexus with the opposition, APNU, Government of Guyana agreement, and Government of Guyana and AFC agreement to get the anti-money laundering legislation that we saw was held strongly. I recall saying to the APNU, why, if the government of Guyana and APNU can agree anti-money laundering legislation, the bills that were not assented to, what prevents us from moving forward? You get what you wanted, we get what Guyana wanted. The Granger and Mr. Harmon insisted that to bring AFC on board. We haven't heard a word from AFC. Try, call, phone, text, silence. The second advent, the president made a direct proposal to Mr. Granger. I will enact your legislation. I will enact your legislation. And he says, during this time of enactment, let's put all of these other issues on hold. Let us go forward and enact your legislation. The records with you. That also availed us not. They did not accept. You could well understand a concern that we share when I spoke about the machinations, why I use that word. Because in the face of those two accounts, granted luncheon version, but in the face of those two accounts, how else could you describe what was done as anything else but machinations? We set up agreement to deal with compromise with one partner that you gave a veto to. And the man has never come up to the table. You can't find him. Calling, phoning, texting, you can't find him. All right, let me say they didn't know that the man like that when they made it a veto. But when we took your bill that may more than likely not be FATF compliant, when we took that and said we are going to then enact your bill, we are willing to go forward. During this time of enactment, put these things aside. How do you explain that if it is not part and parcel of machinations to thwart us from ever getting off or getting beyond the perils of blacklisting. So Gary, the term machination has its origins, not in language, but in our actual experience. There is no other way that any reasonable observer, knowledgeable about these facts, could describe what happened other than this is machinations on the part of the opposition.
So what can we expect in the coming 4 months?
What can we expect?
Marcel.
Pray.
Marcel.
Not a praying man.
So there's nothing on the table, is it?
No. Nothing. Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Robinson, two questions. One, you said you were entertaining questions outside also, but the first one is with you. You spoke of diplomatic behavior and what is expected. There's a saying, two persons screaming, no one can hear.
I didn't hear you. Two persons screaming.
No one.
No one can hear. When you have two persons screaming, I'm speaking of the reaction by the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs. Was that in keeping with diplomatic protocol? And we would have had the ambassador saying also that if government found any infractions on his part, they could have approached him, and there was a way also of reporting him to his superiors and then making the public know what those infractions were. Why wasn't this route taken?
You know, you are behaving as though you have just arrived. I spent, I think, some time addressing similar questions, seeking similar information that Gary asked about ideal. Sure, we could have gone that way. I dare say the muted reactions of the media on Monday could, on Monday and on Tuesday, could indeed be said whilst they were thinking how and following the ambassador's line, calling up who is your boss, what is his contact number, how do I write him, and sometime in October, you get the information to write and pronounce on what you do. I spoke about the ideal timing of intervention. And I continue to be preoccupied with explaining what we mean by ideal. And what we mean by ideal doesn't involve calling a wrongdoer, as far as we're concerned, and civilly inquire. Yes, we didn't like what you did, you know. And can you tell us what is the name of your boss so we could write him? Because we know you're leaving. So, of course, an engagement with you will not be forthcoming. So, can you tell us who your boss is so that we could engage him on this behavior of a foreigner? We don't have time to have another commission of inquiry investigating the actions of the former U.S. ambassador, as we're doing now, engaged in examining 1980 events. No. This event, this behavior needed an immediate response. There is nowhere in the world where people and governments temporize on issues like this. Nowhere in the world. You check it out. Where diplomatic behavior is concerned, there is an immediacy of response. I throw you out of the country. I rebuke you. This happens almost instantaneously. If the ambassador, the heaven's sake, didn't know that and felt that he could make those remarks and anticipate a civil response and a commission of inquiry being set up subsequently, but at least one thing, we have disabused his mind.
Who wrote the speech?
Paul, please.
No, I told him I had a question out of the thing too. I'm taking you to the East Coast Demerara Road project and accusations of cabinet's intervention into the ward of that project. Now we have 4 companies bidding and 3 were unresponsive. Why was Cabinet's decision made to have the contract being worked, the tender being awarded to the lowest bidder? When Cabinet, the argument is that it's to save money. When Cabinet argues that a low bid does not necessarily mean the lowest responsive bid. And 2, why would Cabinet become involved in the tendering process to begin with?
So odd kind of question. I don't know how to answer that. I will say this though, and it is not a direct response. It is more to explain why and how Cabinet undertook its interventions in this matter. Number one, Cabinet has, and as far as we contend, should always have the right to offer its no objection to awards. We don't want to make awards, but awards should not be made without Cabinet's no objection. So that for us has been ongoing for time immemorial. And what has been done in this case on the basis of the no objection is in essence consistent with Cabinet's belief and Cabinet procedure. The specifics of this case, Cabinet understood clearly that the tenderers that were deemed technically, they were deemed technically fit, they were cleared by the eval committee as all being technically equipped to discharge this contract. Our laws, our practices commit to, under those circumstances, the one with the lowest tender. The responsiveness is in regards to the technical and other consideration. The lowest is in regards to the financing. So when we say the lowest competent, the lowest responsive, we're covering all angles. First, you must be responsive, and then when you are the lowest. Why the eval committee decided that we are not in the first instance, we are not committed to applying this cardinal rule, lowest responsive tender. Why we are not committed was not to the Cabinet's satisfaction. So what did they say? They said to us, you see this bid here? You see this bidder? We don't think this is being talking about on the basis of. We're not saying on the basis of. We don't think that these quotations that you put that allowed your bid to be the lowest indeed can give us the product that we're looking for. I'm willing to concede, yes. I'm willing to concede that there are instances when we have indeed gone behind the lowest responsive tenderer. And indeed, we get shafted. I wouldn't pull no punches, you have to hide that, that's a fact. There are instances when luncheon, the lowest responsive tenderer, turned out to be a disaster. But there's a big difference here. Number one is 8 million US, almost $2 billion. That is the difference between the second portion that they protected and advanced as the one to be awarded as opposed to the lowest. But what we couldn't for the life of us understand, the basis for these fears, the basis for these fears. Here is a company that has indeed, of all of the others, done work, build roads, and not build Garden Street Kitty, build roads in the most difficult circumstances. I don't know if you reminded of going through lots 1 to 7 of the Amila Falls Road and the choices where they went and delivered the goods. Lot 7, the west of the Corridor River. A track record in existence. And of course, the third was straightforward. If I am here, building roads in the country, surely it can be much easier for me to mobilize, and my costs for starting up would be infinitesimally lower than a man who won't do nothing about building roads. He had to start from scratch. Those three considerations, Cabinet felt, weren't dealt with properly. And that is why our no objection was withheld. Simply, that is why our no objection was withheld.
But now coming out to luncheon, of the 4 bids, the three were eliminated. The only one that can be third legally, the only one that was okay with all this documentation legally and that could stand out was the one that was over. And that's why the tender committee made the recommendation to have it, have it negotiated. It was either that or go back to tendering.
You probably have a different account than what was provided, Kevin.
Yeah,
Four bidders that received clearance on technical grounds.
that was the pre-qual round.
This is what issues you into a consideration of the second envelope, which deals with price. This is what deals with price. We don't consider, if you deem technically inadequate, you don't meet the technical specifications. And the technical specifications is all the pages in the bid document other than the one where it's put in a page for price. All the pages. The document is 2 inches thick, 1.9 inch is technical requirements. How big is your mouth? How far you could jump? How high you could go? All of those are the technical requirements you have to meet. Our law is pretty straightforward. Once you subscribe to this law, you have to pass the technical, and once you pass the technical, you are now guided by price. That is the basis. If you say to me that there are other considerations that the cabinet missed, I would like to hear them. But these are the considerations.
The final question from Ursula.
Dr. Lanchan, with respect to the national budget and the budget cuts, are there any thoughts for its restoration and the actions of the parliamentary responses to it?
Well, I would say this, the old people have a saying that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And therefore, the parliamentary sitting, at least the first, and I wouldn't say ideal occasion, but the first opportunity on the 10th, the 10th, 11th of July is the next sitting. Thursday, the 9th. On the 9th of July, the next sitting, the entire Guyana opportunity to observe how the political party, the body politic, deal with a situation such as this. Let us be frank. The opposition has perfected the art of trying to destroy, trying to almost remove the inputs into economic development. Here we cutting, here we reducing, here we are not going to make a decision in any reasonable time frame. The way forward is dodged by this intransigence by the opposition. Budget-wise, the 2014 Appropriation Act takes the cake. I don't believe, I'm going to rely on my colleague here, Adam, to advise me, if there has been an historic event where a similar such negative, a comprehensive negative impact on national expenditure ever been exercised by a parliament in this country. I can't believe it. But I spoke at this press briefing about it 10 times. The Committee of Supply withheld approval for expenditure 10 times. 2 times affecting the office of the president. It's a major program. I must admit, some minds consider this likelihood, and constitutional provisions provided a mechanism or provided mechanisms to address such situations. Restoration is not an initiative that has been crafted to deal with today's situation. It's been there. We have rolled it over, so to speak, in constitution after constitution. And it is still a part of the Constitution of Guyana. What is the opposition going to do? Well, I think they could move to amend the Constitution. They can move to amend the Constitution and remove a constitutional prescription to deal with the situation that they have willingly created. They can do that. Two-thirds the majority is needed to have that done. That's the catch. Outside of that, it is a return to Parliament to have some agreement, something along the line of another level of compromise, something that can allow us to put these interventions on our national development behind us. And let us stop seeing the Parliament as the major impediment. It's not natural resources, it's not, people say this is an act of God, a hurricane. These things are all man-made. And there is absolutely no reason why we cannot compromise our way out of this solution. There is, and that is, if you ask me what recourse that is left, it's all about political compromise. Thank you.
Who read the speech?
So, Office of the President authored the speech?
No,
Persons
you
of the
weren't
Office of the
listening.
President?
The compilation and the editing is what gave rise to that speech. Compilation.
Who was involved in the
All the
compilation and editing process?
Members, at the end of the day, inputs are received from from those who are, number one, consulted, because you must ask people to make the, contributions.
And in this
There
case,
are also those who volunteer contributions.
And in
People
this
who
case-
feel that they are so obliged,
Yeah.
they're so obliged to have these remarks made and heard. And then they are compiled and they are edited. And at that point in time, a decision is made. Because the Minister of Foreign Affairs was not Indiana, we say, who shall we bestow? Who shall we bestow the honor of being, one, the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs, and two, to whom we will give the offer of making this presentation.
but you're yet to
Dr.
say who
Hodges,
volunteered
this-
this in.
Let me finish. The presentation, I don't know why the media, I spoke about, what is guy name at Nissel, Brassington. Demonizing, these things are decided by the
Cabinet.
cabinet. This
just
is
the
not,
messenger.
this,
Don't kill the messenger.
well, maybe that's a nice way of putting it.
No, but
If
there's,
you believe that the minister or any minister wake up one morning and say, you know what, I can get the work for go and make the speech, that's the first thing. That don't happen. It don't happen no way. And two, not only I can be the one make the speech, I can be the one who decide what the speech can be. That's not done.
but just as how you said cabinet is responsible for what Mr. Brassington is doing, who had input into this specific
The members
speech?
of cabinet. The members of cabinet. We have a very democratic system. And we called the people
The speech you're talking
contribute
about.
the presentation of the minister. People are overseas, they had contributions to make that went into that speech. People are here, they had contributions. There are people outside
You're
the cabinet.
avoiding
and all.
names.
The cabinet.
No, you spoke of people overseas, people volunteering.
The president, the minister of foreign affairs, the attorney general are overseas, they made contributions. We have a contribution that came from the team that is doing, how you call it, the CHOGM, the cabinet heads, struggle. And they said these are the kind of things we would think that this speech should have. And then you have the people here who are, one, as I said, volunteering, and believe you me,
Former
the
president
other
included?
people have to ask.
Former president included.
No, I don't believe that you're missing the point completely. You're missing the point. I am advising you, informing you about the different ways. That's why we say a speech is not written, a speech is compiled, a speech is edited by the office here, but it is not made by this office. It is not. It is really a reflection of the considered opinions of a number of stakeholders and interests. Stakeholders and interests that has put us where we are. I'm not no lawyer. Where you gonna find Article 27 in the Constitution? You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Yes, thank you very much. Where I gonna find Article 37 in the Constitution? Me? No, nothing. No, believe me.
Question on this, back to this bidding thing. If this is the rationale or the reasoning for this contract, why wasn't this the same rationale for the specialty hospital contract? Because the company,
You
can't
were
remember the
saying
name of the
the
company.
Surrendra, and then another one named Philip Morris or something like
Yes,
that.
they
No,
were
no, Philip Morris is cigarette maker.
Fellers Lloyd.
Feather something,
Fellers Lloyd.
yes.
What,
Yeah.
it's either back to front or
But
like that.
are you saying both of these were technically?
Yes,
I don't know
each
the,
had to apply to a pre-qualification process. There's a pre-qual and then there's the actual tendering. All passed the pre-qual, that's the reason they could have tendered. So all four that
Yeah, let's walk,
six
let's walk,
passed
yeah.
actually for this East Coast contract. Only four of those bid. 3, they said erred in documentation, making them non-responsive. The one who was responsive overbid. So the recommendation is that everybody retender it, that everybody has a thing. Or
Well,
negotiate with the one that is over and bring it down into
You
the estimate.
you probably could have done all of that. You probably could have done all of that. But when cabinet withholds its no objection and send it back, cabinet points out, here, we ain't just notionally withholding. There are reasons for us withholding. Here are these considerations that we think you have not addressed. And we send it back to them.
But that's not cabinet influencing the way that the tender should go.
But you don't believe that if a
Smell like a
man,
baby.
if you don't believe if a, well, not even cabinet,
You?
the average Guyanese, were the award made for 8 million US more, wouldn't the average Guyanese ask yourself, why? When another campaign is started by the man who come in 8 million less, and he gone to the public and said, look, I was coming at 8 million.
Yes, but
I
then-
is the only one who building roads in this country.
Yeah, but NPTAB would now say, yeah, you did come in 6 million, but these are the areas you fell
But
down
this is
in
what
the tendering.
NPTAB did. And NPTAB and the eval committee reconsidered with all, I don't believe that
Based on
only,
cabinet's recommendations.
yes, but I don't believe that you could get NPTAB to concede that in its rejection and its withholding of the no objection and pointing out these concerns, that when they go back to look, that is the only thing they're looking at. They're looking at the whole process. They have to look at the whole process. Because at the end of the day, somebody got to put up value. One, how much is 8 million US? Two, what the fact that you are the only one who building road as opposed to all these other tenants who ain't build
But you
Building
could-
and yet
you-
to
you-
deliver.
You could say it in the same argument with the hospital. You have a company here that's never built a specialty hospital, any hospital
Yeah,
for that
but-
matter.
No,
And
you
look, you
miss-
have one
you-
with the lowest bid with this record.
But I
Why
don't
not
know,
here?
I'm not familiar with those considerations. I know about this one because I sat down there and everybody was aghast. Because everybody know who China Rail was. We were actually less than over, maybe 2 weeks ago, dealing with China Rail proposal to fix parts of Lot 6.
We have some, of brothers saying that China Rail, it was diverted in the area to give it to China Rail in keeping them in Guyana on this project till a mile takes off again. So you know that they're close to home.
No,
And
but
keeping them interested.
they have road projects that are unfinished. Why you not to get a man, what you, if the argument was sound, then you could say it would have to be that this one now would only start when these others are finished, so you keep them for as long as you want.
No,
Why
but
would you?
you're keeping money in his pocket and keeping him happy in the interim while the mile is being developed.
China Rail has an ongoing project. They're building roads right now. If you want to keep them, you got to make sure that this new project starts just about when the other one done in. So even before they pack up, they got to unpack.
What is the case? Is the
Bridget,
Amanda
should we
Farms Road is
say?
about to be completed?
Well, I wouldn't.
And they might want some of
Speak
this money
so-
from this contract to go to the road.
I wouldn't speak so authoritatively about their a mile fall. We just awarded, if I'm not mistaken, I could stand corrected, the portions of
Take it there,
lot
Maria.
7, lot 6 to China Rail. So I can't imagine that because they have
It
completed
was
7.
taken from the other contractor?
The other contractors were totally beyond any useful consideration. They couldn't come up in time and they themselves withdrew. So China, for elements, not the whole of Lot 6, but the elements of Lot 6.
But why wasn't this made public before?
Why was it not one?
The fact that the contract was pulled from, well, the contractor withdrew.
Well, I don't know.
And China.
I am not certain. I did say I stand corrected, but I know China Rail did for the whole project. China Rail billed for lots in the project. And the normal practice is when the person to whom the project has been awarded and they start and they screw up, then you go to number 2.
Do you remember how much?
Well, I could find that out.
One other question.
You have my
quickly.
number and my email. You can give me a call.
One other question quickly. You spoke of the instantaneous reaction to the ambassador.
The need for
The need for.
instantaneous reaction.
But you're quiet on the instantaneous reaction to Minister Manichan's speech, or presentation rather, at the reception.
You don't go to Caesar and try Caesar in Caesar court. The Minister of Manichan is not your sweetheart. She's the messenger. That
No, I'm
the-
talking the
the-
reaction, the immediate reaction to the message.
Oh, the booing?
what you
Yes,
He
the
means
booing,
the
the
booing.
heckling.
Well, we're politicians. I get licked down with brick and thing. You think a boom about me, comrade? If we were going to send someone there who would be daunted by booings and other signs of, disfavor and unhappiness, then we send in a weak somebody. No, our choices in these matters extend to those considerations. Our choices. The minister is a warrior in no mean order. She has those attributes.
Can you say where the government has a conscious immigration policy?
A what?
Conscious immigration policy.
That's a hard question to answer. Tell me what is an unconscious
Well,
policy?
For the country, the census population fell. They was to immigrate people to Ghana, like Antigua and stuff. They have
No,
big businessmen and stuff.
we have pretty much of a open door in terms of visa. We have a visa policy. It's not conscious, it's written, it's accords with the law, and there are rules and regulations that are published that outlines the access to visas under what conditions. But I won't call that conscious. This is standard all the countries in the world. You have policies where that is concerned.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, Gary.
Nah, good.
All right. Take care.